All right, testing, check 1, 2, 3, 4. Sweet, that sounds good. Let's get everything up and running here. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Tuesday afternoon Ableton office hours stream. My name is Zaak Kerstetter. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And this is what I do on Tuesdays. I come in here and I usually will not really have a plan. I'll just kind of come in and just start rambling about whatever. And then people will come in and ask me questions related to music production with Ableton Live. And that's generally how I do it. However, today I have had some things on my mind about specifically DJing with Ableton Live that I want to get into because I've been noticing not a lot of people have been DJing with live, at least not as many as there used to be. I think it's a great way to perform. That's how I often perform, or at least when I'm DJing. That's how I'm going to be DJing. And I think it's got a lot of cool potential and a lot of interesting things you can do once you kind of learn the basics of it. So I want to go over some of the basics of, number one, warping songs, getting your song library all sorted, all that kind of stuff. That's the hard part. And then setting up a template. And then once you set up the template, actually using that template to start DJing with. So that's kind of the idea for today. However, I do want to just put it out there into the world that if you are popping in and you've got a question and it's not related to DJing with live, feel free to go ahead and toss that in the chat as well. I'm going to focus on talking about DJing, DJ techniques, effects, templates, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not tied to that. If you guys have topics you want to talk about and things you want to get into, just let me know in the chat, and I will try to make sure I get around to all of the questions. Before we dive into that, just a little bit of just kind of general stuff that I usually like to start off the stream with. This is part of, obviously, the Tuesday stream. I also do a Friday stream where we do a Friday feedback stream where you can come in here and send me your tracks, and I will listen to your tracks, and I will give you feedback live, as well as other people in the chat will also give you feedback live. So if you're interested in sharing your music, getting some feedback on a work in progress, come back same time on Fridays, and that's when I do the Friday feedback stream. And then if you are enjoying what's going on here, you can always like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord channel, all that kind of stuff. That is greatly appreciated. So I want to go over, again, some of the basics of DJing, why to DJ with live versus using Tractor or Serato or Rekordbox or CDJs or any of the options you have out there. I think there's a number of really good reasons. Number one, it's super flexible. You can do anything you want. You can customize your DJ template to your heart's content. So if there are certain techniques or styles of DJing or certain effects you like to use, you can set those all up in any way you see fit. Number two, if you want to do something beyond just a DJ set, so say you want to integrate guitar or vocals or some kind of performative aspect, maybe you want to do some finger drumming, or you want to do some like live remixing, or you want to like add some different extra elements to your DJ set, which I think is a great way to perform. But you want to start with the basics. Live is a great starting point where you can just build your template. It can be real simple, it can be really basic, and then you can grow it and expand it as you grow and expand as a performer. And if you want to do really complicated stuff, it's really easy just to do that all inside of Live. Reason number three, DJing with Live, I think is really cool, is it's really easy. Honestly, you're like, you do a lot of the hard stuff at home when you are warping your songs and getting everything set up and kind of put together. So that way, when you're on stage, you definitely can screw it up, but it's pretty hard to screw it up. Like if you practice with it, it makes life really easy, which makes it very stress-free when you're on stage. So those are just some of the many reasons I think DJing with Live is really, really handy or useful, or just that's why I like doing it. The other reason is I already own the software. So if you own Live for doing music production and things like that, and you don't want to invest in a bunch of extra gear, all the different softwares that are out there or hardware, it's already there. It's already, all the tools you need are already built in. and you can kind of just do your thing, and that's all you need to do. Which is actually one of the original reasons that I started DJing with Live, is because that's all I could afford at the time, because that's what I already owned. So I want to go over, as I mentioned, some of the basics. This is my DJ template. It's really simple, really straightforward. Not a lot of fancy stuff going on here, just real basic, and everything is mapped to the MIDI fighter twister. This is what I'm going to be using to control my DJ setup. So when I get up on stage, this is the only controller I need. This can do everything for me. But before we dive into that, I want to start just showing you how to, number one, warp a song for DJing, and number two, how to organize those songs once you warp them. What's up, Tripathi? How are you doing today? So I'm going to go ahead and so Tripathi, if you're just joining us, I'm going to be talking a little bit about DJing with Ableton Live. So if that's something you're into, then you're in the right spot. But if you have questions about anything else, that even if it's not DJ related, just go ahead and let me know in the chat. All right, so first thing I want to do is just grab a song, right? Any song you want. I generally recommend starting with really simple material. Most electronic music is pretty quantized. It's pretty on the grid, which makes it really easy to warp. If you're trying to do it like a funk DJ set, or you're trying to DJ more acoustic styles of music, practice first with electronic music, because it's very easy to do with electronic music, and it takes a little bit of effort to do it with not electronic music. So that's where we're going to get started, and I already happen to have a bunch of songs that are already warped. This is my DJ song library. So all of these have been pre-warped because I did them at some other time. So I can use any of these songs when I'm on stage, which is very nice. But just for the sake of example here, we're going to grab an unwarped one. And we are going to try warping this from scratch. If you would like to see this in action, you can also, there's a video I made about warping songs where I basically kind of go through the same process, but we're going to be adding a few extra steps because we're going to be talking about how to set this up for DJing, which means cue points and things like that. So here's a song called The Righteous Mind by an artist called Throwing Snow. It's just a cool song that I liked, so that's what we're going to warp first. So the way we're going to do this is, number one, we're going to turn warp on. Once you have turned warped on, the segment BPM here will match whatever your global tempo is. So right now it's telling me that this song was recorded at 92 BPM. This song is most likely not recorded at 92 BPM. It's only saying that down here because that's where it was when I hit the warp button. So we need to find the tempo of this song, and there's a couple step process that you can use to find the tempo of pretty much any song, which starts by finding a downbeat. Now a downbeat is going to be generally like the start of a phrase. One of the easy ways to do it is just look for like their very first kick drum. So if I zoom in here, we can see that like right around here, most likely this guy, that's probably the very first kick drum. That's probably going to be our first downbeat. You don't need to use the first downbeat, it just needs to be a downbeat. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to this song, and we're going to find that downbeat. So you can hear it right in here. So it's this guy, but we'll just double check. So that very first kick right there, it's a pretty clear downbeat. So what I want to do is I want to get the grid of my song to line up specifically with this downbeat. So you can see up here, this is like bar 6.4, bar 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mouse over it, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit set 111 here. This is going to set the one of your grid to line up with that kick drum or that downbeat, which is usually a kick drum. So I'm going to set 111 here. It takes the one of the grid, aligns it up right here. It also takes a warp marker and adds a warp marker here. So there's still only one warp marker, and anything to the left is in negative bar range, and obviously anything to the right is in positive bar range. So now Live knows this is basically like, this is where the beat starts, or this is where something important starts. So once we've done that, we've lined the one up with our downbeat. I'm gonna right click again, and I'm gonna hit warp from here straight. There are a bunch of different warp from here algorithms. Warp from here straight is the good one. This is basically going to analyze the space between your transients. So this is transient, this is transient. All these little triangles here, those are transient markers. It's going to analyze the space between them, and it's going to guess at the tempo of this song. And if your 1 is lined up with the downbeat, it's generally very good at it. So I'm going to right click, hit warp from here straight, and it's telling me that this is at 62.19, which is probably not entirely accurate, but it's probably pretty close. The other thing that we can do here is that because our segment BPM is 62.19, you can half and double your segment BPM, and it still works. It's still the exact same thing. So I'm going to hit this button here, and it's telling me it's 124.38. Most songs do not have a decimal point in the tempo. Occasionally they will, but it's not super common. What's up, Van? How you doing today? We're going to be talking a little bit about DJing today, but if you have other questions related to other topics, feel free to let me know in the chat. So, which means that this is probably pretty close. This is probably either 124 or 125 or maybe 124.5. Those are kind of the options there. So it's pretty close, but it's not exact yet. Normally this will be spot on, but occasionally this does happen and it's not entirely correct. We just need to go in and just double check our work and see how we did. So I'm gonna take my global tempo, move this up to be like 124-ish. So now when I play, we can both hear and see that the timing of the kick drums is pretty close, but it's not exact. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is that if your segment BPM is close to the you want it to be, if it's like not quite exact, it's going to start looking on time and it will drift off time as the song goes on. So you're always looking for the segment BPM to be the original recorded tempo of this track. If you already know the tempo of this track, if you like downloaded off Beatport and I already told you the tempo of this track, you can just type it in here and that's probably fine. And that is fine. But in this case, we're assuming you don't know the tempo of this song. So we're going to zoom out a little bit and we're going to see if I were to like go to this kick drum right here, I'm going to move it a little tiny bit. So see how this is a little bit off? I'm just going to click and drag it over to where it's supposed to be. And it's now telling me that this is 124.84. So it's getting closer to being 125. So we're looking at probably 125. So we're going to keep zooming ahead and see, make sure there's no drift or anything. Yeah, you can see this guy still a little earlier. So yeah, so as we start to drag this to be more on time, we get closer to being 125, which means I'm confident enough that I'm just going to type in 125 here. So there it is. So now if I play it with the metronome, it's in time at the metronome, which is all I'm looking for. So that's the process here. And this one took a little bit of extra work, but usually all you need to do is find the downbeat, right click, hit set 111 here, and then right click again and hit warp from here straight. And that should give you, within a couple decimal points, the correct tempo of this song. Once you've done that, you're good to go. I can now DJ this song with any other song I want because every song in live is slaved to the global tempo, right? So if this song was recorded at 125 and I play another song that's recorded at 120 and my global BPM is at 123, they both are playing at 123. So automatically all the songs are synced up, which again makes it really easy when you're DJing on stage because you can jump from between different genres. You can do big tempo changes. You can go like 10 BPM away from your current song and you can still make it work. So it gives a lot of flexibility in that way. And we'll see this in action once we have warped a few more songs. But as of right now, we got this song warped. And then the last thing you want to do is just double check your work. And the way you're going to do that is just check every 30 bars, every 50 bars, just to make sure, again, it's not drifting. Occasionally, pretty rarely, but occasionally, electronic music songs will have like a tempo change or something like that. So you just want to make sure that you didn't miss anything. But just by looking at this, we can already see that like that's pretty spot on. So we should be pretty good to go. But just to double check our work, we'll turn on the metronome. Looks good, sounds good. The metronome, we're good to go here. So that's step one, is just warping the song, finding out the tempo. If anybody is in chat and has any questions related to anything that I'm talking about right now, or anything just in general, feel free to toss those questions in the chat. That's what I'm here for. All right, so we got our first song warped. However, when you're on stage, most likely you don't always want to play from the same point. Sometimes I want to play the first half of the song. Sometimes I want to play the second half of the song. Sometimes I want a really long intro. Sometimes I want a really short intro. It varies depending on the song and the situation that I'm in. So what I want to do is I want to set up cue points, which is something that you can do in other software for DJing. And in this situation, we're going to set up multiple cue points by setting up multiple different clips. So what I'm going to do here is, first thing I like to do is find an outro loop. So I'm going to go to the end of the song. I'm going to find a little bit of it here. And I'm just going to loop like 4 bars. Like that. Hit Command L, that'll loop it. The other really nice thing about warping this thing correctly is that if I make a loop like this, it should sound totally fine. So I make a little loop at the end. This part is purely optional. I like to have a loop at the end because if I'm playing my song and I get to the end of it, there are situations when you're on stage, when you're DJing, where you are either still searching for the next song, you don't have the next song queued up right? Or you miss your cue, or somebody's distracting you while you're playing, like the sound guy is trying to like ask you a question, or people are making song requests as you're about to like queue up the next song. Things happen when you're on stage. And the thing that I found is that anything that can go wrong on stage at some point will. So built-in backup plans, build in parts of your template that prevent that from happening. Or like I've played like, really long sets where I had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the set at like a house party or something like that. Just having this loop here means I can go handle something and then come back and the song will still be playing and the song doesn't end. That's only happened to me once though. So I got a loop at the end, and then I'm gonna take this start marker right here, and I'm gonna move this to wherever I want the song to start. Now I might want to start right here, which gives me a little 8-bar intro. I might want to start right at the first beat. Depends on what I'm feeling. For the purpose of this song, I'm probably going to start with like an 8-bar intro right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clip and duplicate the entire clip. So now I have 2 versions of the exact same clip. And on this one, I'm going to set up a different cue point. This cue point, again, could be right here. It could be over here. It could be over here. It really depends on the song, and it also depends on what you're feeling. This song, I'd probably put it over here. So that way I have this little break section that I can start with. And those might be my only two cue points. One at the very beginning, 8 bars before the beat starts, and one in the middle, 8 bars before, this is 16 bars before the next beat starts. So up to you, however you want to do your cue points, depends on the song, but that's all I'm doing is just keeping my loop brace where it is, and then changing the start marker to be wherever I want the song to start to set up my cue points. And again, let me know if you have any questions in the chat, if you have any so far. So now that I've done that, I want to label my cue points. And usually I do either 2, 3, or 4 cue points. Again, depending on the song and what the song is like. Usually 2 or 3 on average. Never more than 4, never 1. So I'm going to label these just so, again, when I'm on stage, I know what's going on. So I'm going to call this one 8-bar intro. And that way, when I'm on stage, I know that if I launch this guy, I've got 8 bars before the beat starts. And on this one, I'm going to do 16-bar second half. So again, if I launch this guy, I know that I got 16 bars before the beat starts. So that way when I'm lining up my songs and trying to time things, I know exactly how long I have before the beat comes in again. Or if there's like a drop, I'll have like, 8 bars for the drop or 4 bars for the drop or something like that. So I've labeled my key points here. And then that's basically it. I got my key points. Now I just need to save them. So saving your DJ library is very, very important. And I'm going to show you the technique that I use for saving my DJ library. Your mileage may vary. You might have a slightly different technique or approach to it, but this is the way that I do it. And I'm also going to warn you that the very first song you save is going to be more complicated than the rest of them. But I'm going to show you that whole process right here. And then we're going to warp another one or two of these songs just to give you guys an idea of how this all works. So to start off, I need to make a folder. I'll make one on my desktop. And we're going to call this DJ library example. Like that. And I'm going to add that over here. I'm doing this separately than my actual real DJ library, which I will also show you guys in just a moment. What's up, Hef? Glad you're enjoying. Yeah, I've been in a big live performance kick recently. I've been starting to play more shows, and it's just getting me excited to talk about, building templates and setups for different styles of performance. So I added my new DJ library folder over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down both of these guys by holding down Shift, and I'm going to drag them in here. This is going to create a project folder and a .als file. The reason it creates a .als file is that I'm saving more than one clip at a time. This will be important later on. So the .als file, we're going to name after the song. So the first thing I'm going to put in here is the tempo, which was 125, if I'm not mistaken. And then artist name, which is Throwing Snow. And then song name, which is Righteous Mind. Like that. Now, here is another option that you have at your disposal, is if you would like to start tagging your songs, you can just add whatever tags you want into the name of the ALS file here. So the way I like to do this is I like to hit a little bracket, and then maybe I'll put like a little genre tag, like house, for example. And if there's other tags, sometimes I'll put in like emotional tags, like, really, heavy beat, or, sunrise for like sunrise set kind of songs, or chill, or laid back, or whatever tags you want, whatever keywords make sense to you, just put them in brackets after the artist name and then song name. And there's a reason for that we will get into as well. So there's our .als file. Now this is the cool part. The .als file saves both of these clips together. So when I drag these into my DJ set, it includes both clips and their cue points. So that's how I'm saving multiple clips together, and I just drag and drop one file in, and it's got everything I need, which is pretty sweet. So that's how we're going to save it. And like I mentioned, the first time we do this, it's going to be slightly more complicated. So as you may have noticed, we have a .als file here, and we have a project folder and a samples folder. This is important only the first time you do this. The samples folder is where the actual song is going to live. You don't actually need the song. And so if you downloaded a bunch of songs off of the internet and they're all living in your downloads folder, when you save your ALS file, it copies and pastes the song from wherever it lives into this samples folder. So this whole file is self-contained. It has the actual audio file itself, and then it has the .als file, which is essentially just your cue points and your warping. So both of them get saved together in this project folder. Now, what you don't want to do is, say this is the next song, you don't want to add this right here because it'll make a new project folder and a new ALS file. So this is the part that's confusing the first time you do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this project folder, and we're just going to call this DJ library. We're going to move this one over to the browser, and then we're going to remove the original one that I made. So now there's just that one project folder that was automatically made when I dragged in two clips at the same time. So now I have a folder here that's just the ALS files for our key points, and plus the samples folder for our actual samples, actual songs. Now that you've done that, next time you do it, you just drag and drop right here and name it however you want, and then you're good to go. So that's the idea. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to do it a couple more times just to give you guys an idea of what the warping process is like. The first couple times you warp a song, it's going to take a few minutes per song, maybe even 10, 15 minutes just to get it right, because it's a little confusing at first. However, once you have done it a bunch of times, you can just crank out a song in like 30 seconds. So usually what I'll do is I'll download 20 or 30 songs at a time, songs I want to add to my DJ set. I'll warp them all at the same time. It takes like 15 minutes maybe to warp all of them, and then I have 20 new songs in my library. Awesome, Hef. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Also, keep in mind, you can always watch this video later on. All of these streams get uploaded to the channel. So if I go a little too fast or I say something that doesn't make sense, you can always go back and watch the videos of the streams. So that's the process. Let's do it two more times just to get a few more songs in here. Let's get another song. We're going to do some housey songs today. All right. So here's a Sinjin Hawk song. I'm going to first turn warp on. I'm going to look for a downbeat, which most likely is going to be right there. And we're going to go through this whole process one more time. So we're going to grab this guy. We're going to mouse over it. You're going to right click, hit set 111 here. That lines up the one of the grid here. This is also really useful because visually when you're DJing, you can see how many bars you have before the drop or before the beat starts. So if I start right here, I can see I have 16 bars before the actual beat comes in. So as a visual cue, that's also really nice. So we got our kick on our 1, which is what we want. I'm going to right click again. I'm going to hit warp from here straight, and it's going to guess the tempo. Right now it thinks it's at 123, but the only reason it thinks it was at 123 is because that's what our global tempo was when I hit the warp button. So it's going to stretch this out and guess that it's at 131, which just by looking at it, looks pretty accurate. Yeah, looks pretty good. And as always, we're going to double check our work just to make sure it stays on time. So we're going to turn the metronome. So it's looking on time, it's sounding on time. And we're going to zoom out, and we're just going to double check later on just to make sure. Looks pretty good. Cool. Looks good, sounds good. So that's our warping done. We have an accurate tempo of 131. And now we're going to set up our cue points. So once again, I'm going to start with the outro first. And usually I like my outro loops to be either 4 bars or 8 bars, depending on the song. So let's try looping this here first, just to see what this sounds like. So this one has like a little bit of the beat kind of ends a little early. So we might start over here and try this first. Something like that seems totally fine. Or I could also make this 8 bars if you wanted to. This should be fine either way. Then we're going to take our start marker and we're going to move it over, and we're going to kind of see how much of an intro do we need. This is a 48 bar intro, which is really long. We probably don't need that. Realistically, I'm not going to be doing a 48 bar intro. So something like this right here, for example, gives us 16 bars. That's probably going to be good. But if we want, we could adjust this and start over here. The other thing you should probably remember when you are setting up your cue points is they're not set in stone. Oftentimes, especially recently when I'm DJing, I will be manually adjusting the cue points when I'm on stage. So there might be a situation where I just want to be over here. You can just jump over here, or you can drag it over here, which I will do quite a bit when I'm on stage. A really awesome key command for doing this is if you just hold down the command key when you mouse right here, so right here you get this little speaker icon. If you hold down the Command key, the start marker jumps to wherever you click, which is really handy for adjusting that, or you can just click and drag it. All right, so here we got a 16-bar intro right here. And then I'm going to duplicate this guy. And then we'll kind of do the same thing we did for the last song. We'll adjust the start marker here. So we'll have another 16 bars, and then we'll have the second beat section right here. So those are our key points. We're going to label them. We'll do 16-bar intro and 16-bar second half. Now that I've done that, I'm going to shift select both of them. We're going to go to our new DJ library here. We're going to save both of them. And we're going to do tempo first, then artist name, then song name. What's this one called? It's They Can't Love You. And then any tags that you want. It's not really housey. I'm not going to put any tags yet. It's going to save it. Boom. There's our ALS file with our key points built in there. And our samples folder has most of our songs built in there as well. Then I usually don't throw in extra warp markers as visual cues, but that's not a bad idea. It's definitely not hurting to do that. If that's something that works for you, then go for it. But I personally have just not gotten in the habit of doing that. Sometimes though, if there's a song that has a really complicated arrangement on this key point here, especially if it's sometimes you get those songs where it's just a brick wall of sound. Here it's very easy to see that this is obviously the intro, and then this is obviously the beat, and then this is obviously the break section, and this is obviously the beat. Sometimes I will, if it's just a huge wall of sound there, I will set the 1 to wherever the next drop is. That way, when I'm looking at it, I can see okay, here is 16 bars. So I'll do that sometimes, but I won't necessarily add in extra warp markers, but it doesn't hurt to do that. Cool. So we may end up warping a few more songs later on, but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this is making sense so far. Because I want to show you how actually the DJing part works now that we have 2 songs. So we're going to take the first song, we're going to toss it in here, take the next song, toss it over here. You may have noticed that I have 2 tracks already in here. This is my DJ template, which is just a 2-deck setup. If you wanted to do a 3 or 4 deck setup, it's really easy to do. You just duplicate your tracks, and then you have a 3 or 4 deck setup, which makes it very flexible for expanding again on whatever kind of template you want to be working with. So now that we're here, let's talk a little bit about mapping. So I have a number of controls MIDI mapped here. You can see these are all the things I have mapped, which is honestly not really even that many. All these guys. But anything that is mapped on the A deck is mapped exactly the same on the B deck. They both have the exact same set of effects. So I have a bunch of beat repeat effects here, and I have a bunch of other effects here. And these are all mapped to my MIDI Fighter Twister. So I mentioned this earlier at the start of the stream. Everything I do when I'm DJing is right here, which is really, really handy. It's very compact. All of these knobs are also buttons, so it allows me just to do a lot in a very small space, and it gives me a lot of color coding, visual feedback, which is really, really useful. So basically, these 8 knobs, which are green, go with the green A deck, and then these 8 knobs over here that are purple go with the purple B deck. So again, everything's kind of mapped in a way that makes sense to me. So, for example, this knob right here, this is mapped to be the volume of my A deck, and this is the volume of my B deck. Pretty straightforward, just in the middle there. The one thing that you should watch out for when you are mapping your volume control, if I were to unmap this and then remap it, the maximum volume on a track in live goes up to +6 decibels. So if I, since I just remapped this, if I crank this up all the way, that means my volume goes to +6 decibels. Generally, tracks are already mastered to be at 0. So if I were to turn that up, it's going to start clipping and it's not going to be good. So what you can do is in your minimum and maximum range for your MIDI mapping, you can just set that to be 0. And that way, if I were to crank the volume here, you can see it's maxing out at 0. Which is great because that means I don't get any clipping or anything weird in there. So obviously I have volume controls. Those are really, really helpful. The other really useful secret for MIDI mapping inside doing like a DJ template is that I have this knob down here. This is my global tempo. So if I adjust this, you can see my global tempo is changing. Now, one thing you may notice is if you were to MIDI map your global tempo, you get a lot of decimal points when you do that. I don't have any decimal points because I've set this up in a very specific way. So let's try this out. Where is my global tempo? Right here. So we're going to go ahead and delete that and remap it. Let's get rid of that. We're going to map this here. So when you do that, you will notice that the minimum tempo is 20, the maximum tempo is 999, which is obviously way too low and way too high. So what I recommend you do is you think about what is the lowest possible tempo you would ever play, and then add like 10 to it. So for me, 60 BPM is probably as low as you would ever really need to go. But just for the sake of example, just to give yourself a little bit of extra wiggle room, we're going to start with 50 BPM being our lowest tempo. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take 50 and we're going to add either 127 or 128, depending on your MIDI controller. Different MIDI controllers, like some like 127, some like 128. It depends. Just try it out for yourself and see which one works the best. So we're going to take 50 and we're going to add 127, which takes us to 177. So now, because the range of our tempos is 127, it matches the resolution of my MIDI controller, which now means I get whole numbers on my global tempo up here. So if you're like me and you don't like those random decimal points in there, just set the range of your global tempo to be 127, or in some situations, 128. So those are the three most important things: global tempo, and then volume for A deck, and then volume for B deck. So we're going to try testing this out. We're going to set our global tempo to be, I don't know, 128, which is halfway in between 125 and 131, which is the tempo of these two songs. So we're going to start with song number 1. Let's turn these both down. Actually, the other thing I need to do if I want to start my songs is I want to MIDI map the clip slots right here. So there's a reason I never have more than 4 cue points in a song, is because I have these knobs, which are also buttons, mapped to triggering those clips. So if I want to trigger the first clip, it's going to be that button right there. If I want to trigger the second clip, it's going to be this button right here, down here. So that allows me to trigger my different cues, so I don't need to use my mouse. So let's do the second half, and we'll start trying this up. There, we got this song playing. So while this song is playing, I'm going to try to figure out where I can start launching this song. And this is going to get a little into mixing and just kind of mixing techniques. But I know I've got a 16-bar intro here. And here, I can basically find wherever this song ends and then add 16 bars to it. So essentially right here. So I'm going to wait till I get to about bar 105, and then I'm going to trigger this right here. So I'll have 16 bars where they're both playing together, allows me to mix them in whatever mixing style that I want, and then boom, we're right in the next song. Now, you may say, hey, why would you start here and go back 16 bars? Because you've got a loop. The loop is generally only there for emergencies. I generally don't need the loop right there. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just go over here, just turn loop off. That way the song will just continue to end, and then I can mix out of the outro here as opposed to mixing out of the loop. Sometimes I'll keep loop on and I'll just use that loop to mix. Again, it really kind of depends. on how I'm feeling and what the songs are like. But for right now, I'm gonna have that turned off. I'm gonna be able to trigger the next song here once I get to about bar 105. We'll turn up a little bit. We'll try this out, see how it goes. So I've already launched this song. We can't hear it yet. I can start fading it in. They're both playing together at the same time. They're automatically in time. And now we're in the next song. And we can fade that one out. Now that I'm in the next song, I can delete the song, go back to my DJ library, grab the next song, drag it in, figure out where I'm going to cue it from, and then mix it in from there. So that's kind of the process here. And again, the important thing is that even though this song is at 125 and this song's at 131, I can play them either in the middle if I want to, which is what I just did here, or I could change the tempo as I'm mixing from one song to the next. So yeah, Van, I don't use the crossfader. I've used it before in previous templates and situations, but in this particular template, I'm not using the crossfader. I'm just using volumes to kind of fade back and forth. If you would like to use the crossfader, it's real simple. You just hit this little X guy right here, set one of these to be on the A side, one of these to be on the B side, and then you would MIDI map this guy right here to mix back and forth. So if you come from like a more traditional DJ background and you feel comfortable using the crossfader, that's all you really need to do to get it set up and get it working. But I took out the crossfader a little while ago, and I've been enjoying it so far. But that's the crossfader. I also don't have a lot of spare knobs on this. In fact, all of these knobs are being used for things, so that was one of the reasons I dropped the crossfader. But yeah, that's kind of the basic idea here as far as like making it work for you. I've found that you definitely can DJ without a crossfader. So yeah, so that's kind of the basics here. And then as I'm going through, I'm dragging in new songs and then deleting the old ones, and then just going back to the my DJ template or my DJ library and dragging in new songs, and then just kind of going back and forth. And that's kind of the process forever. Any questions about that so far? All right, so let's go to my actual DJ library, and we'll try a few more things because there's a lot more going on here than just that. This is like the basic level so far. So now that I've done that, let's grab something here. So we got a song, and here's my cue points. This one, I've got a little intro loop that if I want to mix in from, and then just the song just kind of starts. So we'll launch that. It's way too fast. Change our tempo down. Yeah, so we're about to get into the effects. So volumes, clip launches, and global tempo are the basics. That's all you really need to get started. However, as I had mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of other effects built in here as well. So the DJ rack that I have right here is the main thing that I'm using when I'm DJing to do my mixing. And we open this up, get all devices. It's got a bunch of racks inside of racks where everything's kind of organized into my 8 different effects. And I've organized it in a very specific way here where all of my EQs, excuse me, all of my EQs are on the bottom row, and then all of my like effects are on the top row. I did that specifically so visually from a distance, if I'm like standing back here and I'm looking at my effects, these ones at 12 o'clock are all doing nothing. And then these ones at 0 are all doing nothing. So it's helpful for me just to be able to visually see that, like, because sometimes if an effect gets like left up and you're like, why does this sound weird? You can just look at it and be like, oh, that one effect should not be there. So the EQs are pretty straightforward. We can talk about those first. First off, I have the Djm Filter. So which is, if you've ever DJed on anything before, you probably have used that before or seen that. It's just a low-pass, high-pass filter that's modeled to sound exactly like the low-pass, high-pass filter on the DJM Pioneer mixer that you've seen in every club ever. This is a third-party plugin, but it is free. So you can just go to Splice, go to their free plugin section, and it's one of the top 3 or 4 most downloaded free plugins, and install it, and that's all you really need to do. We can look at it here. It's literally just this. This is all it is. So if you go one direction, you get your high pass, middle does nothing, other direction gets your low pass. Really easy. Great for transitions, great for just doing effects in the middle of the song, great for like emphasizing builds. Really handy. That's all there is to it. It's just one knob. I just macro mapped it here, and then a macro here controlling that macro. So pretty straightforward, really easy, fantastic free plugin. The other EQs, though, were a little bit more complicated. So I just have my lows, mids, and highs, and these are designed to sound just like a low, mid, high EQ that you would get on any DJ mixer ever. However, there was an issue I ran into this that drove me nuts for a really long time, and I'm probably gonna have to spend a lot of time explaining this because it's a complicated solution to a problem that most people just probably won't even like think about. So the easy way to try to do this, to try to do like a low, mid, high EQ, it would be to go into the EQ3, EQ3, which has a low, mid, and a high, and then just MIDI mapping each one of these. However, the very specific situation I found myself in that was driving me nuts was that if you are DJing on like a DJ mixer, 12 o'clock is plus 0 dB, right? And then as you go all the way up to the right, it goes to plus 6 decibels. And as you go all the way down to the left, it goes down to like negative 28, or depends on the mixer. It goes down really far. But 12 o'clock is nothing. If you were to MIDI map these EQ3s, 0 decibels is not at 12 o'clock. It's at like 3:15, which is kind of weird, especially if you have a MIDI controller like this, which has a visual feedback. It has a little pink dot there. I don't know if you can see it. So if I turn this, it's white, but if it's in the middle, it's pink. So I have a visual feedback at 12 o'clock. So that was bothering me immensely. And so I figured out a very complicated way to set it up so that my EQs at 12 o'clock are doing nothing. And as I go up, they go up to plus 6 decibels. And as they go down, they go into like negative 20 something or negative infinity, whatever. So I want to talk about that because I think it's really interesting, but it took a while to do. It might be the kind of thing that I'll probably do a video on the channel later on and just make this available for download because it was kind of a pain in the ass to build. So here's my EQ rack. And inside that, oh, this is the old version. Where's the newer version? All right, that's why. Here's the newer version. Newer version's basically the exact same thing, but the EQs are better. Okay. So it's basically a bunch of racks inside of other racks. The first thing you want to do here is you want to do some phase cancellation to split up your lows, mids, and highs. Now, you could build this rack from scratch if you want to, or you could do what I did, which was download the splitter rack, SPLTTR rack, which Elephant, which is another YouTube channel you guys are probably familiar with if you're watching this. He made a video and a rack about doing phase cancellation to do EQ splits. And he made a rack that's free, so I just downloaded that, and that's basically what's going on here. So I basically have my lows, mids, and my highs all kind of split up here separately, and they're using like a bunch of phase cancellation to do that. So I don't want to get into that because that's like a whole other bag of worms or whatever. What I do want to talk about is how I use the rack inside, one for the lows, one for the mids, and one for the highs. That allows you to change the way the rack responds to your MIDI messages. Again, this might be kind of boring, but hopefully some of you guys are into this. So this rack right here is the actual rack that's allowing me to basically have my 12 o'clock be 0. So where's my highs? Oh, this one's not mapped. Let me remap this here real quick. All right, so we basically I built a rack that has 3 bands to it. It has a clean, which has nothing on it. It has a boost, which has a utility, and has a cut, which also is a utility. There is one macro that is going to turn up the gain on both of the utilities. There's one utility on the cut, and then one utility on the boost. It also controls this chain selector right here. So in the chain selector, if the macro is in the middle, we're going through this clean chain, which has no effects on it whatsoever. So there's no EQing, there's no cutting, there's no boosting. If I turn the macro down, it turns down and it sends it to the cut chain, which has a utility, which goes all the way down to negative infinity. Like that. The boost chain, which if I turn up, is the exact same thing going to utility, except for it maxes out at plus 6 decibels. Like that. And what this means is that when I turn this up, it's only going that far. And the way I did that is you can map them and change the minimum and maximum range. So the gain here goes to plus 6 and negative 6 on the boost, and it goes from plus 35 to negative infinity on the cut. So it's kind of like a fancy way to essentially make it so that when my knob is in the middle, nothing is being boosted and nothing is being cut. If I go down, it cuts it down to negative infinity. And if I go up, it boosts it up to plus 6. Yeah, it took me a long time to figure out how to make this work the way I wanted it to. So now it behaves the way I want. You go a little bit in either direction, it doesn't do anything, but as you start to go in either direction, it starts to turn those things down. So I basically made that rack, and then I put one of those on my high chain, one of those on my mid chain, and one of those on my low chain, using the splitter rack that I just downloaded off of Elephant's website. So I'm using the phase cancellation splitting, going into racks that allow me to just turn utilities up or down, but instead of it being at like 3 o'clock, being no boosts, it's 12 o'clock. So it's kind of like hard to explain succinctly, but that's how I did it. So you have a question about the macros. Is there a way to still have on? I'm not sure I understand the question yet. Still have over the macro mapped to another macro. So you can't. You can't have multiple macros control on a macro. You can have. So I have this macro here, which is controlling all the stuff inside of the rack, is being controlled by this, which is then being controlled by this guy right here. Let's see if I can do this so I can see all at the same time. So this one controls, I can't point it so you can see, this guy, which then controls this guy. So controls that, which controls that, which controls that. So the macros still have to go out one layer at a time. Yeah, Artur, we're talking about a DJ EQ that I made that allows me to basically have my macro set at 12 o'clock, which means nothing. So if I have a song like this and I want to turn down just the lows, mids, or highs, this turns down the lows, or boosts the lows. This turns down the mids, or boosts the mids. And then this turns down the highs, or boost the highs. The trick is that when you go down, they go down to negative infinity, and when you go up, they only go up to +6. That's the whole trick here. But still, when they're in the middle, they're doing nothing. So that was my overly complicated solution to make my EQ behave exactly the way that I want. Any other questions about that? Feel free to let me know, but that's the EQs. DJM, just the third-party plugin, real simple, and then lows, mids, and highs, which are all going inside this rack, which has phase cancellation, EQ splitting, and then different macros with utilities to make it boost or cut exactly the way I want. I will probably make a video on this at some point and then make this available for download, so you don't need to build it. You can just use the one that I have. So yeah, those are the 4 effects down there. Really useful, just utilities for all around everyday EQing when you're mixing. And they're designed to emulate basically the same controls you would get on either a hardware DJ mixer or even software DJ mixers. The other effects are my fun effects. I use these a little bit for mixing here and there, but mostly they're for fun. The most important of these is going to obviously be the fade to gray. If you have not seen the video, I released the video last week and a half ago maybe. It was last week, about the one knob fade to gray, which is a preset. So if you go into your audio effects under audio effect rack, and then open this up, and then go to performance and DJ, and then go to the one knob fade to gray. That is the preset that I'm using. What's up, Beat Me Here? Yeah, Van, I can also make the whole MIDI Fighter Twister template available if people want. It's going through some changes right now. I'm like updating some effects and tweaking some things, and so because I've got some more gigs coming up, so I'll probably do a few more updates, streamline a few things, maybe tweak a few things, and then probably make a whole video on it and then release it. But if I don't do it in a couple weeks, remind me and I'll just release it as it is. So yeah, so the one knob fade to gray, I have mapped. Oh, I unmapped it because this is the newer version. Right here, right next to my volumes, because it is super, super important. If you did not watch the video that I released, go watch my videos. I appreciate it. And then it's basically an EQ and a delay at the same time, which creates this kind of washed out delay. That's really, really useful. So if you are playing a song and you want to exit out of that song into another song that's like a different genre, or like stylistically the songs don't really match, or you're like in the middle of a song, you like play a song and you think it's gonna slay and people hate it and people are leaving the dance floor and you're like, I need to get out of this song right away, fade to gray is the answer. Just fade to gray out, fade in the next song, and just any transition just automatically works. So we can try testing this out in just a second. Let me grab a song that I think will work. Kind of a similar tempo. Let's do this guy. So say I want to fade in this next song here. I can start fading this up and then turn up the fade to gray. and then boom, you're in the next song. So fade to gray, fantastic effect. What's up, Jamini? How are you doing? I don't know if there's a good place where people are uploading racks. I know there's a bunch of websites where you can like download racks and that different people have made, and some of those are free and some of them are things to pay for. I don't know if there's a good place where people just like exchange racks, but I think that'd be super cool. So Beatmaker, I talked about this at the kind of start of the stream. All of my songs that I've warped are in a folder that I have access to in my browser. So if I want to grab any song, I can just grab a song and just click and drag it in, and then boom, there it is. So that's how I organize my songs. So by built-in fader transitions, do you mean like, do I ever like automate a fade out in the middle of a song? Like do something like this in my song, and that way if I don't like the second half of the song, it just automatically kind of fades out? If that's what you're asking, I've only ever done that. I want to press the X button, or like pressing a random button. No, I've had previous versions of this template where I had dummy clips that I would running my tracks through. So I would have like, I could hit a button and it would like automatically do a 4-bar fade out. Oh, the crossfader. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. I don't use the crossfader. I have in the past, in previous incarnations of this set, but I don't use the crossfader in the current version. Partially just because I ran out of knobs on my controller, because I only have 16 knobs. Yeah, so I'm not currently using the crossfader, but I think crossfader is cool, and if you like it, you should use it. All right, so yeah, fade to gray, one knob, really easy. It's a preset. You don't need to do anything. It's just already there and just makes, you're playing one song and you want to get out of it. It makes it really easy. So I always will have a fade to gray in any DJ template that I make. It's just so useful. Especially because when I'm DJing, I like to mix genres. I like to like jump around from like one genre or style to another quite a bit. And so sometimes those transitions can be a little stressful to pull off when I'm on stage. And so having something like the fade to gray is just a great kind of like redundancy backup plan where it's like, all right, I just need to smoothly get out of this song, fade to gray up, and then mix into the next song. So I'm a big fan. Other than that, I have these 3 other effects here that I use somewhat sparingly. I kind of use them in different situations. They're mostly just there for kind of fun. So let me go ahead and remap these because things got messed up here a little bit. Nope, that's the gate one. All right, we'll try these. So the first one is going to be this distortion guy. It's like a little bit crushy / filtered distortion. Usually wouldn't use it on like this kind of music, but it still sounds cool. And I've had this one forever. I don't even remember how I made that one. Yeah, so it's a bit crusher, an auto filter, and a utility. So we're just getting a little rid of the low frequencies and also turning the resonance, as well as turning the volume down a little bit, or also using the downsampler here. It's like a fun little character thing. I don't use it a whole lot, but it's kind of just nice to have around. The other one that I actually use quite a bit is the gate. This one is super fun in just all kinds of situations. Does it sound weird? But it basically just chops it. And this is just using the AutoPan. And I believe I made a video on how to do kind of rhythmic gating with the AutoPan. But basically, you can go in here and it's basically just a drive one, an 8th note chopper, a 16th note chopper, a 32nd note chopper, and a 64th note chopper. And they're just on a different chain here, just going between them. One of the kind of like tricks to both using this and making this is the offset here changes where you start within your the kind of phase of your rhythmic gate. For some reason, 280 degrees, I think sounds really good. So really fun effect. Again, you don't need to use it all the time. Use it kind of sparingly, but it's cool just to do some like little rhythmic chopping in whatever's playing. And then the last one is kind of a newer addition. I made this really, this is actually a preset. This is just a reverb preset called A Larger Sky. Just makes this big kind of washy reverb space. And I often use this on songs that have like a really like fast ending, when it just has like a lot of sounds going on and then the song just ends. There's like no outro. I'll just crank this up right at the end of that song, and then it echoes off as I'm mixing in the next song, or as the next song's kind of coming in doing its thing. So this is kind of for very specific situations, or if you're doing like really minimal stuff, you can do some like cool dubby kind of sounds with it. But that's what this one is for. These two, the reverb and the distortion, I think are very much optional. I don't think you necessarily really need to use them. I don't think they're gonna like make or break your setup. Those are just kind of like, I had 2 extra slots on my rack because I made this rack before there was the option to do 16. So I just had those there to kind of fill up that space, and they're cool. Don't use them all the time, but if you have other effects that you like to use, especially again, if you're coming from like a CDJ kind of setup and there's certain effects that you really love on your CDJ, you can just recreate those inside of Live using Live's built-in effects. And then you're able to kind of like emulate the same kind of techniques that you're using on the DJM or whatever you're using for DJing. So those are my effects. And they are duplicated exactly between the two of these. So those are the main effects. The other effect that I also tossed in here for all of these guys is a limiter. You do not need a limiter when you are putting together a DJ template. However, again, going back to the redundancy, backup plans, things are going to happen when you're on stage, toss a limiter on both your tracks. There's no reason to not have it. You never really need to go above 0 dB when you're performing, and you don't want any clipping. So I put a limiter on both of one of my tracks individually at the end of my signal flow. And then I also put a limiter on my master. Because again, maybe your elbow accidentally gets knocked, as somebody else is in the DJ booth, and you like turn a knob or you do something and it cranks up the volume really high. You don't want that to happen. Put a limiter in there just to be safe. And this is just the default settings of the limiter. I didn't touch anything. It's just a 0.3 decibel ceiling, and that works great. The other effects that I have in here are my beat repeat buttons. And those, let's see if those mapped in this version. Go ahead and remap these guys. These are just different beat repeats. And let's try some different songs here for these guys. Let's find something in a different tempo range. Let's do this guy. All right. So these are just beat repeats, and there's just 4 of them. There's a quarter note beat repeat, an 1/8 note beat repeat, a 16th note beat repeat, and a 32nd note beat repeat. So these all have the exact same settings. The way I made these was I took the chance percentage, took it down to 0. I took the grid and set it to whatever I wanted the grid size to be. And I took the mode from mix mode to insert mode. That's all I did. And then I mapped the repeat button on each one to these guys right here. So when I turn these on, it turns it on, turn it off, turns it off. So really fun, really easy. You can definitely go too overboard with these by beat repeating everything all the time. So try to use them sparingly. But they're a cool, fun effect, and it's really easy to do. And like I said, the only thing I did, take the chance down to 0% so it doesn't turn on automatically. Map the buttons here. And then this mode here actually makes a pretty big difference. Mix mode will play the repeats on top of the original song. So you get both at the same time, which sometimes can sound cool and sometimes can be a little bit too over the top. So I prefer insert mode, which makes it so it's going to mute the original song while the repeats are happening. So if I switch this to mix mode and we listen to it, you can hear the song still playing in the background. Whereas in insert mode, you only get one at a time. So I prefer that for DJ style beat repeats, but that's all I did here. Everything else I didn't touch. The other thing that is really important about how I have these mapped is these are all mapped to MIDI CCs. This is very, very important. So if you notice, there's 2 numbers here. The first number is MIDI channel. The second number is whether it's either a MIDI note or a MIDI CC. So some MIDI controllers will send MIDI notes, some will send CCs. Usually you can change them in some kind of editing software. If you map a knob like this to a CC on a button, that means if I'm holding it down, it's on. If I let go, it turns off. So you get an instantaneous control. It's either on or off when I'm touching it. If you were to map these to MIDI notes, you'd have to hit it once to turn it on and hit it again to turn it off. So watch out for that. It might make a big difference to you. It might not. I personally think, especially for things like this, I want instantaneous on-off control. So mapping things, mapping buttons like this to CCs is very, very important. And as I mentioned, most MIDI controllers, you can edit whether they're sending a MIDI note or a MIDI CC. So if you want once for on, once for off, map to MIDI note. If you want instantaneous on-off, map to MIDI CC. All right, those are the effects that I'm using. As I've mentioned earlier in the stream, this is a very kind of stripped down version of my DJ template. This is the one I've been using recently, which I think is good. I think minimalism is something that I kind of been striving for in a lot more of my DJ setups. And this is about as minimal as I could get it and still feel like I had enough tools to have a good time on stage. I will probably rebuild my DJ rack with 16 macros in it, just because that's a thing you can do now, and I think it's super cool. Cool, so that's going to be it for the effects. Any questions about that? Any of the effects? Sweet. So other things that are useful and important. Queuing. Queuing out of Ableton Live is kind of tricky for a lot of reasons. Because you want to be able to hear the song before the audience does, right? So the way you can do that is, number one, you have to have an audio interface that has multiple outputs. Not every audio interface does. So you need to make sure you have an interface with multiple outputs, like the Scarlett 2i2 won't work, but the Scarlett 2i4 will totally work. So what you want to do is you want to set your cue output. Will I be able to do this right now? I should be able to. So you can turn on multiple outputs here. So I'm going to turn on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I'm going to set my cue output to be different than my master. When you do this, this button right here, you can turn on. If your cue out and your master out are the same, this doesn't do anything, right? So cue out has to be different. Once you've done that, the cue button is turned on, which means that your solo buttons down here are no longer solo buttons, they're now cue buttons. And you can turn them back to solo buttons here if you want. But if you get a little headphone icon like this, that means if I'm playing this, see how it's blue? That means it's being sent to my headphone output separately than the main output. It's going to 3 and 4. It also means that this controls the volume of the cue output. So you won't be able to tell right now because, again, we can turn this down so your audience doesn't hear it. And then you can turn this up, and you can see this volume is going out to your headphones or your cue output. Awesome, Thomas. Yeah, glad you could pop by. Feel free to watch the video later and shoot me any questions if you have any. So yeah, so that's the kind of the process for being able to do a headphone cue output so you can hear it before your audience can. Another way you could do this, if you are very comfortable with like the DJM mixer that they have on every club ever, you could just set up this to go out outputs 1 and 2, and then out of your multi-output audio interface, send it into channel 1 and 2 of your DJM, and then send this one out 3 and 4, and then plug that output into the DJM on a different channel. And then you could actually do a lot of your mixing in the DJM, and you're basically using Live as just the place where you are doing some of the effects, and you're launching clips and setting up your cue points. So if you wanted to, you could do like a hybrid kind of setup where you have like a little tiny MIDI controller, and then you have the DJM, but yes, that's where you do a lot of your actual mixing, if you're comfortable with something like that. Which is something I'm planning on doing once I can afford a DJM. So yeah, that's kind of the deal. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is important about DJing or building a DJ template. Oh yeah, the other really nice thing is that when you're on stage, if you hit this button right here, anything and everything that you do inside of the session view gets recorded over to the arrangement view. So when you want to record a set, whether you're like rehearsing in your home, you know, you're in your bedroom and you're like doing a practice session, you can record the whole thing and listen to it later if you want. Or when you're on stage, you just hit this button and it record everything in its entirety. And if you like make a mistake on one transition, you can go in later on and you can like play with the automation, and you can go in here and you can like fix any mistakes that you made and nobody needs to know. And then you release it and you sound like you're a perfect DJ. What's up, Alex? Yeah, you can absolutely map almost anything you want to your computer keyboard. So if you hit Command K, anything that turns that kind of salmon orange color is mappable to your computer keyboard. So if I wanted to map these to like the A, S, D, and F buttons, now if I hit these, I can map them. However, they're not instantaneous. They're on and off. And as far as I know, there's no way to change that. I'll think if there is, but I'm pretty sure it's like you hit it once, turns it on, hit it again, turns it off. But you can map it to your computer keyboard. And one of the cool things here, it's actually two cool things. When you're keyboard mapping, Live treats the lowercase letters different than uppercase letters. So if I map these to A, S, D, and F, if you do Shift A, Shift S, Shift D, and Shift F, those are mapped separately. So if I hit Shift, I can do these guys down here. If I let go of Shift, I can do these ones over here. The other cool thing is that your keyboard mappings don't override your MIDI mappings. So these are all MIDI mapped, but they're also keyboard mapped. So you can do both at the same time, and that's kind of cool because usually MIDI mappings override each other. So yeah, so you can map things from your computer keyboard. However, they are toggle. They're on-off, not momentary controls. I'll see if I can think of a way to do momentary controls with keyboards, but I'm not sure that's a thing. Yeah, off the top of my head, there's not a way to do that. But yeah, so yeah, if you're going to record your set, you can go back in and you can mess around with the automation and tweak things if you need to. But pretty much every set that I've played for the last couple of years, I've recorded. And I haven't released most of them, but I have them in case I want to go back and listen to them and kind of, sometimes I like to go back and critique my own work or kind of like learn from my mistakes or kind of see what I could have done better. But recording sets is really easy. And if you want to bounce it out, you just bounce it out the same way you would bounce out any audio. Anything I'm missing? I think that's like everything. Oh, one other important thing. Oops. Don't know how that happened. So, where did everything go? All right. Other important thing is sometimes when you are in live, I want to look at my effects. I want to be able to see what's going on with my effects and see if anything's turned up or turned down. And sometimes I want to see where I am in my song. And that's the two views. We have the clip view down here and we have the device view. If I would like to switch back and forth between clip view and device view, you can do so by MIDI mapping this guy up here for device view and this guy right here for clip view. So on my controller, I have this mapped here. So as the song is playing, I can just jump back and forth, and I can also jump back and forth between viewing the devices on one track versus devices on another track, just by hitting those buttons. So this one right here, it's kind of hidden. It's like a little secret area that you can map. This will show you where you are in your current clip. Right now, if I hit the button for this one right here, it doesn't do anything because there's no tracks playing there. So, but I can still go back and forth between these and these here. So that's one of the other mappings that I have kind of built in there. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today, at least when it comes to DJing. If you have never DJed in live, I would highly recommend it. It's really fun and it's really easy. And as I mentioned earlier, you can customize it to do whatever you want. If you want to go fancier than this, you're more than welcome. I have redone my DJ template many, many times over the last 10 plus years I've been DJing with live. And sometimes it's really big and it's complicated, and I'll have lots of dummy tracks, and I'll have lots of effects, and I'll have like drum racks, and I'll have like acapellas loaded up, and I'll have lots of stuff going on. And then over the years, I've made it more and more minimal. So you can have it start really minimal, or you can add more layers to it as you go on. It's really up to you, and it's really up to like, what do you want to be doing on stage? What's fun for you as a performer? Like, how do you want to how do you want to exist on stage as a performer? And there's a lot of options for that. It is a little bit more work up front. So over here, these are all the songs that I've ever warped. There are hundreds of them. I haven't counted them in a very long time. It took me a long time to warp all these songs and get them all organized in there. So it's a little bit more work like at home before you get on stage. But now that I have a large template of songs, or not a large template, I have a large library of songs, I can do whatever I want when I'm on stage. It's really easy, and I can be as creative as I want to be as a DJ. If you are interested in getting into it and you want to like start, taking the steps towards DJing with live, I would definitely recommend every week download 10 or 15 songs and then warp them all at the same time. Just like sit down for as long as it takes to warp those songs and then add them to your library. And after a couple weeks, you'll start to have a decent chunk of a library, and DJing becomes a lot more fun when you have more options, more songs that are ready to go, and then you can start jumping back and forth and really kind of experimenting with how you want to mix different songs together and really start kind of building those skill sets. If you've already DJed with other DJ softwares, it should be a pretty easy transition, except for the warping stuff. The warping stuff does take a minute, but once you start to build a template, once you start mapping it to your controller, the sky's the limit. There's also a lot of like really fun things you can do with like different kinds of controllers, like APCs versus you can even use like the Tractor controllers or the DDJs, the Pioneer controllers. And you can, because controllers all send MIDI, you can map them to live. So if you already have some of that gear and you want to try it out, don't be afraid to try it out. Those are pretty handy because they have a built-in audio interface as well, which makes your life a little easier. It's less gear to carry around. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on the kind of the basics of building a DJ template. If you guys want, we can maybe do some more advanced DJ stuff later on. Maybe if you guys like try it out and come back and let me know. But that's going to be it for the DJ portion of the stream. But if anybody has any questions in chat, or whether they're DJ related or not, feel free to toss them in the chat. I appreciate all you guys showing up and hitting the like button and hanging out with me today. I've been thinking a lot about DJing because I've got a 3-hour set coming up on Friday, so I've got to make sure I'm ready for that. But I wanted to talk about DJing because it's been coming up more and more recently with you guys and just kind of in general in my life. But hopefully that was useful and you enjoyed it. But I'm going to hang out for a little bit longer and see if you guys have any questions. But if not, I will probably see you guys on Friday. I'm going to come back for my set on Friday. I'm going to do the song feedback stream. So I'm excited to see what you guys come up with for that. Oh, interesting, Hef. I didn't know that. I guess I kind of assumed that different languages you could key map separately. I usually find that you don't need a lot of key mappings anyway. Usually you have plenty. But I've never tried to do key mappings for different languages. That's cool. Yeah, the one thing that you kind of need to watch out for with key mappings that I've noticed is if your computer keyboard is turned on like this guy up here. Oh, you can't see it because my head is right there. Behind my head, there's a little button with a little computer keyboard on it that turns on your computer keyboard as a MIDI controller. If that is turned on and I try doing my key mappings, they don't work. So watch out for that. If live gets conflicting messages between computer keyboard as MIDI controller versus keyboard mappings, it prioritizes the computer keyboard as keyboard controller, and your MIDI and your key mappings don't work. So you gotta watch out for that. No worries, man. Thanks for popping by, and I will see you again real soon, I'm sure. Yeah, now that I've been talking about the DJ rack, I definitely want to build a new version and get some more macros in there and maybe a few more effects. I'll have to think about what kinds of effects I'm missing and what I would probably use. And if anybody, like I said, has any questions that are not DJ related, you are more than welcome to pop those in the chat as well. Sweet. Well, I think at this point, I'm going to call it for the evening. I appreciate you guys popping by and checking out my thoughts on DJing. I will be back on Friday for the song feedback stream. Take care of yourself. Make some music. Also, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. That's also helpful for me. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button if you are not yet subscribed. And I will see you on Friday for the next stream. So have a good one. See you guys later.